Welcome back to another edition of the Magic Ladies Podcast, the podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we are going to get in the most recent game against the Detroit Pistons, where the Orlando Magic dropped their fourth straight game in a row. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers and trying to become one of the biggest Orlando Magic podcasts here on the YouTube platform. So remember to hit that post notification bell, and let's go ahead and get into today's episode. So the Orlando Magic fall to the Detroit Pistons 116 to 135. Cade Cunningham finishes the game with a double-double, 30 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds, 3 steals, 3 blocks. A couple of other notable players for the Detroit Pistons that had themselves a pretty nice game. First off, every single starter for the Detroit Pistons finished in double figures. Tobias Harris added 23 points, and Jalon Dixon had 21 points and 13 rebounds. For those who don't know, the over was hit heavily for Jalon Dixon, who all the bets were saying was going to score at least 12 points in this game. He had as many rebounds as his projected point total coming into this matchup, and he had 12 free throw attempts. He was going to hit the over 12 mark just based off of getting to the free throw line in this game. But I regress. I digress, excuse me. For the Orlando Magic, 24 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists from Paulo Banchero. Franz Wagner, 22 points, 7 rebounds. After that, spooky. Jalen Suggs and Wendell Carter Jr. combined for 16 points. Desmond Bane had 12 points and was 4-15 from the field, 1 of 4 from beyond the arc. And the bench was relatively productive. Tristan da Silva came off the bench, knocked down 3 threes, 15 points. And Anthony Black and Goga Bataz, they both had 10 points off the bench themselves. Not too much time from Tyus Jones, and we did not see very much of Jace Richardson in this game either. So, the first thing obviously is 0-2 on the 5-game road stint so far. That already is a bad sign. Number 2 is this Orlando Magic team continues on a night-to-night basis to face the same exact issues. Through 5 games, they have faced the exact same issues, and they continue to plague this team in a way that they are getting absolutely hammered. And those 2 glaring issues, you may ask: turnovers and allowing points in the paint. Let me run something past you guys real quick, and you guys tell me if this doesn't sound like a big deal or not. The Magic were outscored points in the paint 64 to 48. The Magic turned the ball over 17 times. Now, granted, Detroit turned the ball over 14 times. 17 might not even seem that bad in terms of the discrepancy between what they did in terms of turning the ball over versus forcing turnovers. Here's the biggest difference, though. The Detroit Pistons only allowed 13 points off of those 14 turnovers. The Orlando Magic allowed 26 points. 26 points off of 17 turnovers. 19 points in transition. 19 points in transition to Orlando's 10. Again, remember, this is the team that said they wanted to play faster coming into the year. 10 fast break points in this game. Struggled to hit the 3 ball once again. Desmond Bane was a big root of that. If I'm not mistaken, he was absolutely atrocious from beyond the arc. Get 1 of 4. Best 3-point shooter of the night probably was Franz Wagner, 3 of 4. I know that, or maybe Tristan da Silva for his 3 of 6. One of those 2. I know that Wendell Carter Jr. hit 2 of his 3s, but I mean, the man played limited minutes. He was only in the game for 15 minutes and fouled out. Jalon Dixon had his way in this game. The offensive rebounding numbers might not seem that different. Actually, it leans closer to the Orlando Magic. They had 15 offensive rebounds. The Detroit Pistons had 14. And the second chance points numbers would say that they favor the Orlando Magic, but it wasn't necessarily about the numbers for the rebounding in the sense of that, in terms of that. It was more about the productivity and when they happen. This was a game for Orlando where they allowed 30 or more points in 3 of the 4 quarters and a nearly allowed 30 points in the very first quarter of this game. This team is not defending. This team is not defending. They just are not. They're not defending. They are starting to look lazy on the defensive end. I'm only coming off relatively aggressive about this because it's starting to show in a way where even the stats scream that this is a team that's not playing up to its potential. Let's go through some of the things, shall we? Number 1, they are second to last in assists per game and second to last in assist percentage. They are bottom 4 in turnovers per game, meaning they are top 5 in most turnovers in the NBA right now. They are bottom 4 in offensive rating. They are bottom 8 in defensive rating. This team is pretty much mid right now. By the way, they're the worst three-point shooting team in the NBA. We discussed that the other day. They are the worst three-point shooting team in the NBA in terms of how many they make on a night-to-night basis, and their overall team percentage is bottom 4, bottom 3 in the league. The only stats that the Orlando Magic rank in the top 10 that are positive, check this out. Offensive rebounding, they're tied for 10th, and they are 8th in pace of play. They are 8th in pace of play, and they're tied for 10th in offensive rebounding. And here's the crazy part. Here's the crazy part about all of it. The pace isn't boosting the offense. Again, one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the league. They're bottom 10 in points per game. And even though they're a high-level offensive rebounding team, they're near middle of the pack in terms of total rebounds so far. This team is just not playing with the grit they once had before. And I don't know if that's some kind of weird philosophical change attached to wanting to be a better offense. But for a team that has such high expectations, the offense is something that we knew was going to be a work in progress build. We knew that coming into the year. And so the idea that it was going to be rough in the early goings was understandable. I think many Orlando Magic fans find it more than normal that this team is still a bottom 10 offense to start out the year, because there's certain things that they're just going to have to work out given the fact that they're trying to make a play style change. But what Orlando Magic fans could not have anticipated, and probably had all the right not to anticipate, is that the offensive identity change would have such an influence on the lack of defensive effort that this team is now no longer a top 10 defense, and they have never been a top 10 offense. And now they're neither. Now they are neither. And again, Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner both had pretty solid performances in this game. They could have used a lot more from Wendell Carter Jr. Definitely could have used a lot more from Jalen Suggs offensively. And this team once again was litting when it was Olay defense. It was a lot of letting guys into the paint and getting to their spots and being just elite level finishers around the rim and in the mid-range area. They were making Tobias Harris look like prime Paul George as a mid-range shooter in this game. Did I mention the fact that Tobias Harris got to the free throw line 6 times? Tobias Harris got to the free throw line 6 times as a guy who is a career on this, or let me say for the season. This is a guy who on a career average gets to the free throw line about 3 to 4 times a game and got to the free throw line 6 times. 6 times. And I know that doesn't sound like a drastic change, but this is a guy who typically is not a player who attacks the rim, and yet he was put in position in that painted area to get to the free throw line on multiple occasions. Not to mention the fact that Cade Cunningham was able to get to the free throw line relatively well as well. He got to the free throw line 5 times. So it's 11 free throws between those two. And then, of course, I mentioned Jalon Dixon, who was very physical around the rim in this game, who got to the free throw line 12 times. Teams are picking on the Orlando Magic, who the Orlando Magic should come into most games favorable from a size perspective and a length perspective and from a range perspective in terms of what kind of defensive versatility they have in their lineups. Yet, teams do not respect their rim protection. And why would you? If Wendell Carter Jr. can only play 15 minutes in a game before fouling out. Why would you? When Jonathan Isaac can only play, 6 minutes in this game. Why would you? When even in 26 minutes with Goga Bitadze has never been considered a rim defender. Definitely not an above average rim defender. Obviously, as a center, your goal / your job is to protect the paint. But he's never been considered an above average rim protector by any means, right? And he had to play 26 minutes. Jalon Dixon came in and took Wendell Carter Jr.'s lunch the entire evening. And I think that one-on-one matchup alone of Jalon Dixon versus Wendell Carter Jr. was the representation of the biggest issue with the Orlando Magic right now, is that they're getting punked. They're getting punked and they're getting out-physicaled. Something that's never been an issue in the tenure for Jamal Mosley until now. This has never been a team that's dealt poorly with physicality. One of the reasons I hate that I have to keep bringing this same dang series up, dang near every other episode it feels like, but one of the reasons why that series against the Cleveland Cavaliers 2 years ago went 7 games is because of the fact that this team was able to expose the fact that the Cleveland Cavaliers did not deal with physicality well. Where do we get the proof of that from? Oh, the Cleveland Cavaliers series against the New York Knicks. That also proved that in that exact same postseason. That's what got that series to 7 games. This team has never had an issue with being able to bring physicality to the floor on a night-to-night basis until this year. I don't know if they heard all the chirping about the offensive issues over the summer and they're putting so much emphasis on that they've lost the will to guard. They're just focused on trying to get in transition and get the offense started up as fast as. Hey, that's great and all. But it's not winning you basketball games. Your defense is taking a hit and the offense trying to play that style isn't even on an upward tick right now. It's not even on an upward tick right now. There's only one thing so far this season that has been a bright spot offensively for this team to show any kind of progression that makes you feel like this ship can get righted. That one bright spot is that the Orlando Magic are number 1 in NBA free throw attempts per game. They lead the league in free throw attempts per game at 37 attempts a night. Right behind them are the Houston Rockets with 36, the Philadelphia 76ers with 33.7, the San Antonio Spurs with 32.7, and then let me adjust this. The Houston Rockets are second with 36. The Utah Jazz have 34 at third. The Philadelphia 76ers are at 4 with 33.7 attempts. And then the San Antonio Spurs round that out with 32.7 attempts to round out the top 5. That's the saving grace. The saving grace, something I told you guys time and time again throughout the offseason, was that I know that this duo of Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner have the ability to combine for anywhere between 18, 19, 20 free throw attempts per game on a night-to-night basis because they are two guys that know how to really put pressure on the basket. In this game, they combined for 28 free throw attempts. Now, here's the kicker. Here's something that'll really grind most Magic fans' gears. Here they are as the best team in the NBA at getting to the free throw line. Yet, they got to the free throw line as a team 40 times and were 28 of 40. That is 12 points left off the table. 12 points, for context, added to the scoreboard in this game would have made the score, just using it in a vacuum, of course, 135 to 128. That is a 7-point difference as opposed to what was nearly a 20-point loss. That is a 7-point difference with the chance, with momentum swinging, with the game being much closer due to the free throws. Maybe this is a game where a possession or two changes paired with taking care of the basketball, because obviously the turnover issue was big. And all of a sudden now you have a game that swings in the Orlando Magic's favor, but instead you leave 12 points off the board at the free throw line. Paulo Banchero missed 7 of them. Guess what? Franz Wagner missed 4 of them. So there you go. There you go right there. There you go right there. That's the tick. That's the tick. I believe it might have actually been 28 of 41 because if I'm not mistaken, I was checking the stats and it says that, yes, it says Anthony Black missed one as well. So really, I think the stats need to update. I think it's 28 of 41. But your two star players that got to the free throw line, 28 times combined, missed 12 free throws. 12 free throws missed in this game. Pair that with the turnovers. Pair that with the fact that there were 26 points off of turnovers. Another 13-point swing, because the Orlando Magic only scored 13 points off of turnovers, despite forcing only 3 less turnovers than the Detroit Pistons did. Turnovers, the paint problem, and leaving points on the board at the free throw line. Again, the bright spot is that they're getting to the free throw line at a high rate. 37 times a night. That is huge. For context, because I had to do some digging, last season they were still top 10 in free throw attempts per game. They were 8th, despite being an injured ball club for most of the year. The year prior, when they made the playoffs and was that rising team that everybody said was going to be, a team to, watch out for the foreseeable future, when they went into that postseason and went against the Cleveland Cavaliers and had themselves a decent first round, guess where they ranked in free throw attempts per game? Number 1. They were number 1 in free throw attempts per game when they had their breakout season as a team. Made the playoffs with Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner at the helm. And were a team that really, really could have done some special things had they had another real strong perimeter shot creator. So that's the saving grace. The saving grace is that the last time they were in this kind of position, at least from that perspective, they made the playoffs and they were a team to be reckoned with in that first round. But the thing that also held them in that series was their defense, especially in terms of containing Darius Garland and containing Evan Mobley. The version of Evan Mobley offensively now for the Cleveland Cavaliers would kill this team. He would kill this team. The Orlando Magic have a lot of work to do. And we talked about this last podcast that This is a team that has a lot of question marks. But the first thing they need to do is just get back to guarding at a high level. They just got to get back to playing defense. They got to get back to playing defense real bad because it's slipping. It feels so early to already talking about the season feeling like it's slipping through their fingers. It's 5 games, right? You have a chance to momentum swing this in a real way. But it's less of them losing the games and more of how they're losing the games. It's the same way every night. I've said it the last 3 games in a row. Transition, getting killed. Despite the fact that this team wants to play faster, they're getting killed. You need another representation of how they're getting killed in transition. The Orlando Magic had 10 fewer shot attempts than the Detroit Pistons. So yet again, you're trying to play fast, up-tempo basketball, yet you're not even getting equal or more possessions than the opposing team. But you're trying to play faster basketball. This team has to get back to guarding. This team has to get back to their bread and butter of being like an elite level defense. Just get back to top 10. You don't have to be number 2. You don't have to be top 5 like you've been the last 2 years. Just get back to top 10. You're bottom 10 right now. You're bottom 10 as a defensive team right now. You're bottom 10 as a defensive team right now. Let's talk about some of you guys' fan comments from last episode. Shout out to everybody that's dropping comments. Please continue to drop your thoughts on this Orlando Magic team under my comment section. I will be addressing you guys' comments every single episode. Whether it's older comments that I think are applicable to today's games or newer comments reflecting on some of the thoughts that I've shared in most recent episodes. Shout out to Luis Rosario 9522. Thank you again for liking and subscribing to the podcast. He says, I have been a Magic fan since 1989. Wow, that's a really long time. This Jace breaking into the lineup feels like when Penny was ready to take over and the coaching staff was not ready. And somebody underneath the comments, shout out to Steve Williams 8817, said, would love to see Jace replace Tyus for minutes. They need something. And Jamal Mosley mentioned 2 games ago. Jace Richardson did not play in the game the other day. He mentioned 2 games ago. I believe that was when they played the Atlanta Hawks, that Jace provided like a spark in his 8 minutes on the floor. I think he drew an offensive foul, got a bucket, didn't do too much, but was just, out there providing a different energy. And offensively, this Orlando Magic team needs a change of pace in some regard. I don't know what's going on with what's going on with the Jace Richardson minutes. I don't know what's going on with Tyus Jones. The reference I was trying to make, I believe it was a podcast or 2 ago, I was trying to make a movie reference, and it was the idea that I'm worried that whatever offensive system the Orlando Magic are in now, or in general underneath Jamal Mosley, is the equivalent to the Space Jam scene when the little aliens steal some of the NBA All-Stars, quote-unquote, talent, powers, and become the Monstars, right? And those guys became a shell of themselves on the court in real life for their basketball teams. And I'm starting to have this weird feeling about this Orlando Magic offensive system where I don't know where the powers are going. I don't know who they're going to. We need to find those people. But it's like players like KCP, now Desmond Bain and Tyus Jones, they touched the ball, got their power stolen, and the Monstars ran away with them. I don't know where they at, and I don't know when they coming back, but I hope it's soon. Because this Orlando Magic team They're not getting productivity. They're not getting real production from the guys that they need to step up the most. Wendell Carter Jr., I told you guys before the season started, I said he was going to be arguably the most important player this season in terms of what his personal development means for this team. And for the preseason, it looked like it was going to be a different Wendell Carter. This was the best offensive rebounding team in the league through 4 preseason games. They were a better 3-point shooting team through 4 preseason games. Desmond Bane was hooping, and they didn't even have Jalen Suggs on the floor during that time. I don't know what we're talking about right now with this team. So maybe Jason Richardson is somebody that we need to genuinely consider as somebody off the bench. And I love Tyus Jones. I've said this dating back to before he was signed that he was my number one pick as a budget offensive option at the point guard position to help with the depth behind Jalen Suggs and help steady the ship for this team. And he just has not been that so far. Shout out to Carlos Diaz 8907. He says your analysis today was on point. Keep up with the excellent work, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to continue to provide as much positive perspective as possible. And by positive, I don't necessarily mean, in terms of praising the team, but I want to give the right kind of perspective that represents what I think Orlando Magic fans think and feel about this basketball team. So I want to be consistent in my viewers, my views of this team, and I want those things to be consistent with what you, as fellow Orlando Magic fans, feel about this team, given the fact that the fan base of this team, I think, is going to be so influential to the decision making of this team by the midway portion of the year and definitely by the end of the season. I think the Orlando Magic are in a situation where if this ship does not right around, Orlando Magic fans are going to start calling for heads. And deservedly so, because as we mentioned in the episode from yesterday with the comment that it mentioned that this team has not changed nearly as much as people would think when they start throwing out the phrase growing pains, there is a certain level of needing to really shake things up because they haven't truly done that yet. Yes, you sold the farm from a draft picks perspective in order to go after Desmond Bane, but in terms of a real roster shakeup or a heavy decision like Jamal Mosley being moved on from, for example, that's something you only dive into that bag if you feel like this team has cracked its ceiling and has no point of return. And there's a worry that through 5 games that we're already creeping up on that. Let's read a couple more of these comments from last episode. I don't think Paolo or Franz can ever be 100% effective in the offense together. That was from Jonathan Snell, 7728. Shout out to you, bro, first off. And second off, that goes back to what I was saying about the drastic decision making, right? That's going to be that's going to be the first question for the front office. And this is the smart way to go about it, if I'm being honest. The first thing to do as a front office is to consider a coaching change. That's the first thing you do. Because sometimes it just comes down to having a different voice in the room. A great example of that is Mike Brown right now for the New York Knicks. The New York Knicks look like a much better basketball team this year. They genuinely do. I know they just dropped that game to the Milwaukee Bucks. I know they're 2-2. But when you look at them, especially offensively, and you look at the way they're going deeper into their rotation, things that were the biggest issues for that New York Knicks team last year was that it felt like they had depth, but Tom Thibodeau wasn't leaning into it. It felt like they had no real offensive creativity, and it felt like they were running Jalen Brunson into the ground because they were essentially forcing him into being like a heliocentric, on the ball all damn game kind of guard. And Jalen Brunson has shown in the past that he can be just as effective off ball as he can on ball. He played next to Luka Doncic, who is a true heliocentric player. And in this season, so far, through 5 games, you've seen more innovation offensively. And yes, it's come with some growing pains, but understandably so when trying to inject a new offense into a team that also brought in a handful of really important free agents. They brought in Jordan Clarkson. They bring in Gershon Yabusele, right? You start the season off without one of your main guys in Josh Hart. Mitchell Robinson is still someone that has been in and out of the lineup to start the year off. So they've had a much more decent excuse, but you can still see aesthetically some of the differences that Mike Brown has brought to the table for this team on the offensive end, where even if things aren't insanely different just yet in terms of how the outcome is shown, you can see on the floor that this is a team that is developing something that's going to be much more impactful once we get to the postseason. Like having a more innovative, more movement-based offense is going to mean a lot more to this team when they get to the postseason. Relying on their depth during the regular season to keep guys like Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges fresh by the postseason is going to be important. Those are things that Mike Brown addressed day one for this team, and it's been effective so far. So sometimes having a new voice in the room can matter so much. And I don't know if the players are dejected. I don't know if they're checked out. They didn't seem like they were already a little off on Jamal Mosley coming into the year. And I don't know what would have caused them to start to become a little dejected. But this team looks like they've just, especially off of the bread and butter of Jamal Mosley being a defensive-based coach, it seems like this team has just thrown their hands up and let everything fly when it comes to defense. And that's tough. And so Paolo and Franz are the second question that's going to come up, because the idea is going to be, well, we might want to get some of these draft picks back, or not necessarily their draft picks back, but add some real draft capital back to their mix. They're a very expensive basketball team, and maybe the redundancy of these two makes it where, for this team being so expensive, if we're not good enough to be a team that can get beyond the first round of the playoffs, then we need to focus on our longevity as a franchise just as much as we are trying to maximize this current window that they're in. So that'll be the next question that comes up. The last comment that we're going to read for today is from Pedro Perez, 2053, excuse me. Shout out to you, boss. And this is a pretty dense one, but I think it was a good way to end. And it was actually in reaction to this Magic Pistons game, saying, again, the Magic gave up on defense and are comfortable trying to run and gun with hopes of outscoring your opponent. They used to hang their hat on defense, but now find that running is easier than playing defense. An elite defensive team tries to hold their opponent to 25 points per game. 25 points per quarter. Last year, the Magic allowed, on average, 26 to 27 points per quarter. Tonight, against the Pistons, they gave up an average of 33.75 points per quarter. Shaking my head. First off, shout out to you, Pedro, not only for that comment, but for doing your due diligence and pointing out those numbers. And I touched on that a little bit earlier with the fact that I, mentioned that 3 out of the 4 quarters, the Orlando Magic allowed 30 plus points to be scored by the Detroit Pistons. Again, he said it in the very beginning of the comment, I think it's going to be the part where I kind of anchor this podcast at, is that this team, they used to hang their hat on defense, and now they're trying to run and gun. And it's not working. It's not working. And they need to realize it before this season starts to truly slip through their fingers. I mentioned earlier that it already feels like there's semblances of that already to kick off this year. I'm not willing to go that far yet through 5 games. But what I'm saying is, this is a team that has lost their identity. This team has lost their identity. The thing that made them the most dangerous over the last 3 to 4 years is that despite being such a young ball club, they defend. They defend. One thing I can say about a team like the Toronto Raptors right now, for example, I think I've used them as a reference on this podcast already this year. Yes, they are trying to play much more up-tempo basketball. I believe Toronto actually leads the league in pace of play. I want to double-check that so I don't get this wrong. Yes, Toronto is one of the best teams in pace of play this year. Let me double check that to make certain. Yes, they are sixth in pace of play this year. But here's the thing. They're sixth in 3-point percentage. They are third in assist per game. They are top 15, top half of the league in offensive rating. They are one of the lowest defenses in the league, very similar to the Orlando Magic. But the difference between the Orlando Magic and a team like the Toronto Raptors is that they're converting on their three-point shot attempts and they're getting really good looks at the basket that are allowing them to, while they're playing as fast as they are, getting good looks. They are top 10 in team field goal percentage. They're sixth in the NBA in team field goal percentage. That's because they are getting efficient shots by moving the basketball. Again, third in the NBA in assists per game. They are moving the basketball around, creating mismatches for the defense, collapsing that defense down, and allowing themselves to get easier looks. So despite the fact that they've been a poor defensive team, they've been so good as an offensive team that despite being 1-4, it looks like things are clicking in the right direction because they have the upside as a team with players like Scotty Barnes on the perimeter, with guys like, let me respect a couple of guys here, R.J. Barrett, guys like Jacoby Walter, Jamal Shedd, right? They have guys who have real defensive upside. Mind you, the other reason why this team isn't as good defensively right now is because Jakob Poeltl's dealing with a back injury. I think a healthy Jakob Poeltl makes this team at least a middle of the pack defense, paired with the fact that they're a top level offense in terms of how they play the game of basketball this year. So they, again, even them, same way I was mentioning with the Knicks earlier, having an excuse for the growing pains aspect of it. This Toronto Raptors team is a better offensive team than the Orlando Magic, and they're, despite being a worse defensive team, have the excuse of saying, well, they don't have their best rim protector. Guess what? The Orlando Magic have their best rim protector, and he fouled out in 15 minutes. Oh, man. Oh, man. This Orlando Magic team is quite the head scratcher. They play the Charlotte Hornets tonight as of when you guys will be seeing this episode. And somehow, they are favored by 2.5 on the road. Despite the fact that the Charlotte Hornets have been playing good basketball. I mean, they got to right this ship, dude. They got to right this ship. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Charlotte Hornets game. For a couple of nuggets of information just to take into the Charlotte Hornets game to make things a little bit clear going into that game, things to watch for. The Charlotte Hornets are top 5 in pace. So if the Orlando Magic want to get into a track meet, this is a team that would love to get into a track meet. The Charlotte Hornets are tied for third in the NBA in points per game with 128 points on a night-to-night basis. They are the second best team shooting the three ball as a squad, shooting 41% from beyond the arc. And they are fifth in the NBA in assists per game. Fifth in the NBA in assists per game this year. And they're a top 6 offense as far as offensive rating is concerned. So if you want to get in a track meet with the Charlotte Hornets, good luck. I think I said this. If it wasn't this past episode, it was the episode before. Teams like this one that want to get into a track meet, these are the teams that are going to pick the Orlando Magic off. These are the teams. The teams that we consider coming into the year to be some of the bottom barrel teams in the NBA, the bottom barrel teams in the Eastern Conference, your Chicago Bulls, the Charlotte Hornets, the Toronto Raptors. These are the teams that are now, top 5, top 8 in pace of play. And they're going to be the teams that pick the Orlando Magic off because the Orlando Magic are trying to play their brand of basketball and they're just not as good at it. They're just not. How about this? They're just not good at it. So if we're having the same conversation about this team getting killed in transition, if we're having the same conversation about this team turning the ball over and it leading to 20 plus points in transition, 20 plus points off turnovers again, you heard it here first. Like that's the underlying dilemma. Shoot, that's the sitting right in the middle of your forehead dilemma issue for this team. So we'll see if the same issues stick against this Charlotte Hornets team, or if they'll be able to right the ship with at least getting some more efficient three-point shooting in this game, or hey, maybe just knock down your free throws to help make this game a little bit more attainable, and we'll see where things go from there. But this is going to be a really tough game for them, coming off of a loss that I feel like was a really good chance for them to turn this season around for them in the early going. And now they're going up against another team that specializes in the thing that the Orlando Magic struggle with right now, which is dealing with teams that play up-tempo basketball because they haven't figured out how to do it themselves just yet. But with all that being said, this pod has already been about 40 minutes. I don't want to drag on too much further. We will see what the Charlotte Hornets do in tonight's game against the Orlando Magic. The Orlando Magic have a chance to get back on the board and break this losing streak. Otherwise, that'll be 5 in a row. But this has been another edition of the Magic Latest Podcast. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know down in the comment section down below. Rank them in order, 1, 2, 3, in order. Who do you believe is the most to blame for the Orlando Magic's rough start to the season? In order, 1 through 3. 1 being the most responsible for the rough start. 3 being the least responsible, but still very responsible for this 1-4 start for the Orlando Magic. I will be in the comment section checking those things out. Again, remember to hit that post notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new videos. And until next episode, I'll see you guys later. Peace.